German, French, they'll have the unique ways of structuring languages, but English is much simpler.
Yeah. Basque, Welsh, Turkish, Finnish. There's some real outliers out there that if you're going to commit to learn one of those, like my hat's off to you. They have no relationship to Romance languages, to familiar anything.
But fascinatingly, Turkish and Finnish are related to Hungarian. So that's an interesting axis there.
The weird thing. Never mind
And
pictographic languages.
And nobody's mentioned, yeah, I was going to say nobody's mentioned Japanese, Chinese, Korean, that world. Very different.
And Mandarin has 6 tones. Cantonese has 9 tones. That's insane. Years ago, a very long time ago, a Japanese friend of mine was visiting, and he showed me how he uses his word processor. And this is a very long time ago. And he had a Latin keyboard with some special characters on top, but he would basically do phonetics in English-ish, which gave him drop-down menus to choose from, katakana, kanji, and hiragana. And he would then pick his way through, and he could embed English words or numbers or other sorts of things in the middle of sentences. So this is a long time ago. So it was, maybe Windows 95, I think. I was dreadfully impressed. I was like, oh my God, he has to do that every time he wants to write.
Yeah, I would imagine Chinese keyboards are a little more sophisticated right now.
I have a theory. I have a theory because I live in Britain, so obviously the Brits, like every nationality, you're proud of your history or whatever. And they always say to me, "Oh, because the British Empire is why the English language has caught up so much." And I like to point out that, in my opinion, it's because it's a simple language. It's not so much. It was maybe the empire had something to do with it, but the main reason is it's so much simpler to learn than any other language I know.
Really? I think English is so full of exceptions that it tortures people. I think Spanish is much easier to learn, for example.
Okay, I don't know about Spanish, but the grammar structure, everything, is like, I mean,
it's easier to start
primary school.
Until you get into the idiomatic expressions and so on. But it's very easy to start. It's a totally simple grammar structure.
It's also a very pliable language. It's very punny. It's very absorbent. There's a lot of things I love about English that way. That I don't know. I think it flexes really well.
Yeah.
Who knows?
One of the key things is the verbs. Sorry, I can carry on about that.
Oh, that's okay. What about the verbs? What about the verbs? Tell us about the verbs.
In Greek, when you say what is it? Tenses, I, you, he, she. Every one of those, when you translate to verb, has a different ending, and sometimes the word changes. So, past, future, all that. In English, it's all wiped away by the way that English is structured. In Greek, I spent the first 4 years of my life learning verbs and their endings and how they change to completely different, if it's past participle or future, whatever. Literally a totally different word. In English, it stays the same. A couple of other things change around.
Yep. If anybody's interested, there is a brilliant young linguist on YouTube. There are many, but my favorite is this guy, Griffin, Words at Work. And he does these very short YouTube shorts, like vertical format. And he's just so good, like really impressive. I've got a whole collection of his videos in my brain.
Jerry, when you started saying there's a brilliant linguist, I thought you were going to say me, but I'll take it.
Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry, Alex. That was a flub on my part. Flub on my part. All right. We do have a topic for today. I'm kind of excited about it. It's a thing that just showed up, and I realized after sending the invite out what the different articles were that kind of provoked me into the topic. So I will share another one that I think I found afterward, which was from Axios. And it was, there we go. And basically, behind the curtain, a white-collar bloodbath. And then there's another, there was a New York Times article. I'm a LinkedIn executive. I see the bottom rung of the career ladder breaking. Also, and so let's leave aside arguments about how AI is just a flash in the pan. This will never happen. Let's start with the premise of this shit happens faster than we think it does. that there's a really swift movement to and here we immediately get into the very interesting question of, to adopt generative AI is a great premise. So do we adopt it to wipe out whole job categories, or do we adopt it to enhance people's work capacity? And what does that mean? How does that work? Mark, I can actually hear your keyboard pretty loud. Do you mind muting when in the meantime? Thanks. So I'm happy to start with wherever anybody would like to dig into the issue, whatever the invite provoked you to think or whatnot. Gil, please.
I'll start. I'll start with two things, Jerry. First, of course, this begs the Ken Homer question of who is we, and who.
I don't know that my question had a we.
It did. You said, what do we do about da da da?
Oh, okay. What do we do about it? All right, good.
And I don't raise that just to be, philosophical wise guy, but because the question of which is the we that has the agency for which things, I think is relevant there.
Yes.
Like my agency is different than Sam Altman's agency, for example.
Of course. Yep.
So that's one question. The other is that for me, this question is very interwoven with whether we stay on the job standard or get off the job standard, which is to say UBI. The disappearance of jobs has a very different meaning in society if there's universal basic income than if it doesn't. If people's life support, survival in the United States, their health care, et cetera, is tied to having a job, then this is a very different kind of question and a crucially important question than if you go back to Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward from 1880, whatever it was, which posited a technologically sophisticated, highly productive society in which people do not have to labor to produce the goods necessary for society, but the surplus sustains everybody. So there's a huge philosophical background to, do we live in, you have to have a job, not just to have meaning, but to have survival or not? And if we need jobs for survival, then this is a massively disruptive and dangerous transition. And if not, then maybe not so much. That's all.
Wait, that's all? Are we done?
That's all.
Thanks, Gil. Rick.
I'll be very brief because I'm just popping in because I've been spending my energy working on political areas, particularly in Indivisible. And the reason why I bring it up is how to work with people who aren't that AI sophisticated and want to learn about it. And I'm hosting some sessions about learning how to AI, and I don't think I'm very far on the learning curve, but I'm ahead of theirs. But they're getting something out of it. And the idea I've been trying to orchestrate is something called, it's a mouthful, but I'll explain it to you, which is human AI enabled emancipatory neo-learning, which simply means we need new methods to avoid cult indoctrination. And I hosted a session last night for Indivisible, and there are nearly 150 people there. And it was all in preparation for the June 14th march. And I was trying to convey the idea that chants are great for bringing people together, but they don't necessarily have much deep thinking behind them. And the question is, how can you create a sort of cascade of increasing complexity where people can become more interested in exploring how to understand more complex problems? Because we live in a society of simplistic reductionism, where the KISS principle, keep it simple and stupid, reigns supreme. But unfortunately, that principle can be stupid at times, and MAGA is a good example of it. So anyway, I'm just going to put a link in. I'm going to be hosting another session, and this will be working with people of all walks of life. It'll be June 11th, and I'll put a link in there. I haven't got the link yet for it, but I can share the post and the background for it. And they composed a song, and I was blown away by it. I was blown away. I took all the chants and memes, put it in, cascaded them out, and I put in the prompt, Gregorian chants with trance drum beat. And it came out with something which was like, whoa, it's not exactly what I prescribed, but it's really quite impressive. And it got a very good review last night. So anyway, I'm just popping in, share it, mull over it, and contact me if you think this resonates with any of your other political groups that you might want to share it with. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rick. Mark.
Yeah, two things. First, Jerry, I was trying to take notes on your theme because when I've been late or come in, tardy, I kind of miss a lot. And after your theme, this happens faster than we think it does. You had 2 points, which I missed because I was attempting to type them on. Do you remember them? I mean, I can later.
I'm sure we can reconstruct them, or we can find them in the transcript or whatnot. So one point was, gosh, what did I say? Anybody?
There were 2 points, kind of opposed, and I thought they were
Well,
interesting.
I brought in a couple articles that I had found. One of them said that basically the bottom rung of employment is being wiped out, that entry-level jobs are going away. That was one of them. And the other one was it's going to be a bloodbath in sort of employment in general, the behind the curtain article from Axios. So I went there, but I did say something else. And I don't have the transcript at my fingertips.
No problem. I'll just mention something that happened to me after sickness and meds, which is kind of like a curiosity deficit. I used to be a lot more curious than I am now, which I'm together enough to notice. And that is kind of freaky. And, we'll see what happens. I don't want to freak about its freakiness, but it's something that educators and I have talked about for decades, is that how do we get people to be curious? Because they'd rather be entertained. Or they'd rather have their AI companion basically, tell them how to do their job, and they just do the job and they go, okay, what's next, AI companion? And then they do that. That kind of, and I would like a better term than curiosity deficit, but growing up and being in high school, there are those people who loved the next new book and other people who are just like, oh no. And that's nothing to do with AI, but kind of seems to be required in order to even create a prompt. What do I want to know? That's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I think there's a bunch of really interesting sociological stuff happening that's unrelated to Gen AI, but in parallel with and will affect this little ball of issues that we're busy talking about. And a piece of it is what you just described, Mark.
I don't know that it's unrelated. Now,
well, I think it's being accelerated by Gen AI. It's connected to it, but I think it predates the sudden emergence of Gen AI on the scene. I think it's, I think it's been barreling along already. This curiosity deficit disorder or lack of critical thinking or whatever else you want to talk about.
I would basically say that in a whole systems kind of approach, we need to look at, who makes the tools and who becomes the tools, and Churchill's adage. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Klaus.
Yeah, maybe another way of looking AI is how it's being employed and what's already being done. So my son used to work for Samsara, which is a company that is totally AI based, and they started several years ago, actually. They're one of the first out to have the enterprise version of OpenAI. And so when you think about their workflow, for example, it's an engineering firm. I mean, they're providing industrial engineering services to anything that moves to logistics companies. So when they install equipment, for example, they can have an engineer who is working on a particular piece of equipment and needs to know some specificity. He can call the AI, or he can talk to the AI and say, give me a diagram for this and this thing. Pops up instantly, right? So they have their entire technology and training schedules on this AI in a knowledge vault. And anybody within the company can call up on what is now needed to, whether that's a technical thing or a service call or what have you. I'm working on a with Pete, on a program with a team of agents, which is a team agent approach, where the entire knowledge base of farm to market, is consolidated in vertical programmed agents. So you have like a logistics agent, you have a broker agent, you have a farm agent, technical service provider, and so on. Because when you load everything onto one single agent, that doesn't really work. They get overburdened and they start spunking. They start fantasizing and making up stuff. But so you do vertical integrated specialists. So that is an enormous advantage, because when you think about food and agriculture, for example, the knowledge required to move the entire supply chain, from a farmer who needs to understand about regenerative products, he needs to understand who is working in the field anywhere in the United States, in the biosector, biofertilizers, in seed mixes that are uniquely suited for his particular piece of land. How do you bring all that knowledge together? How do you fit this? Then all the way to the CPG manufacturer who needs to figure out how am I going to work with differentiated crops and so on. So those things are enhancements, they're amplifications. It's not displacing anything. In fact, it enables the decentralization part of the economy, because now you can break down the economy into smaller pieces who still all have access to the best available information and science and support structures that are out there. Where the job losses happen is, for example, anybody who is coding, where you may have had a team of 10 people writing software. Now you can do this with maybe 2 people. So that's where it really hits. For example, apps, all the Apple Store, that's going to go away, because you just put an AI agent into it and you can code one up in a day, to know everything about what you're trying to, what you're providing. So that's that. So it's a very mixed bag, right? I see a level of sophistication that is now possible in a very decentralized economy by applying this AI. Right now, when you go online, type AI agent, and it's all over the place. It's incredible how much energy is in that particular sector, to train up agents for very narrowly defined vertical knowledge bases that support you. So yeah, no question, it's disruptive, but so was the Excel spreadsheet and the Microsoft PowerPoint. And this is maybe a little bit more amplified than that, but in the 90s, every accountant was freaking out when spreadsheets came in, because it replaced the 10-key calculator. And 60% of the workload was going away, pounding on keys. So yeah, I see this more as disruptive, as catastrophically taking the jobs of people in the short, at least in the short to medium term.
Thanks, Klaus. It occurs to me that we just got to talking and I didn't do the intro. So this is the OGM Open Global Mind weekly call for Thursday, May 29th, 2025. And then a couple of comments before I pass to Alex. One is, in this weird world where the American government is busy dissolving agencies that used to help people, and Klaus, I'm thinking here about Farm Service or whatever. I mean, there's in healthcare, in farming, in whatever, in foreign aid with USAID, all these things are being dissolved and taken out of action. And they were actually pretty helpful, even if they were old and crusty institutions. There's strangely an opportunity to do what you were just describing, which is how do we scaffold in and make very available, and I think that's key, the kinds of support that were represented in an individual farmer who was just retired out and had joined some place to give advice to young farmers or something like that. And I dread saying that because I think that the human contact and all of that is and was hugely important. But at the same time, if we could make deeper knowledge available more broadly to more people, there's a net gain of knowledge passing, et cetera. Then separately, on the entry level bottom rung jobs, the thing that strikes me is that the work that entry level employees used to do is the work that's being automated quickly. It's like, hey, make this spreadsheet, go pull together data from here and here, go do this, go do that. And it was often drudge work, but through the drudge work, at New Science a long time ago, we used to have stuffing parties when the issue was ready to mail out. And we would print out all the labels, and then we would sit down in the conference room joking and bantering, and then we would see the name of all of our clients as we put the labels on the envelopes and stuffed the issue that was going out that we were just proud of having finished writing into the envelope and made a big stack, and then one of us hauled it across the street to the post office kind of thing. But you got that the handwork was how you started to learn the business and who the clients' names were and all that kind of stuff. That there's a disruption of how we learn different crafts, I think, happening, which is fundamental here as well. And then third, and different thought, to the topic of whether this is just going to be like this, the calculator or the spreadsheet, both of which seem to have made a whole lot more work. It just allowed us to be more powerful in the work we did. My working analogy these days is that Gen AI, one way of looking at it is it's more like a flesh-eating bacterium. It eats jobs that don't come back. It eats jobs that are not replaced. Now, I could say that it pushes the work higher up the stack. It makes people more thought workers, and now they can control various AIs. But the AIs are getting pretty good at the thought work too. That is not white collar work is far from immune in this round. But the key thing to me is when a task is automated well, in fact, possibly even beyond what a normal human could do. Think of discovery in a legal case. Discovery in a legal case, computers are inexhaustible, tireless, and thorough. They don't get tired after having read too many legal documents and start thinking about the vacation they're about to go on and, oh, damn, I don't remember the last couple pages I just read. They don't do that, right? And so we're getting into a place where some of those things get knocked out. And then all the people who were trained up to do that particular function, it took some time to get that training. They now need to reorient and figure out what else they're going to train up for. Except in the meantime, while they're busy training up for the next thing that hopefully will get them more money, everybody's busy automating things. And nobody knows which of these things is going to get automated out from under them. Nobody knows. And nobody's having that conversation, and nobody's helping people adapt. And I'm wondering, I'm hoping as part of this conversation that we can talk about what those things cause and what are the knock-on effects and what services might be offered. Jesse, you've been thinking really hard about just employment and how work works. And I'm wondering if you think about this, and Gil, I'm sorry for saying nobody. What I mean is there are a few people worried about this, but it's not in a broad conversation. It's not really, I don't hear this as an important issue on many fronts. It's clear after every large, deep change in society, it turns out there were a few people yelling this change is coming before the change, but nobody was listening to them. And I'm sure that's happening right now. But Jesse, I wanted to pass it to you for a second, just for where are you on all this?
Still processing everyone's thoughts. I'm really listening because I don't want to give my insights and what I've been seeing in the data and people that I've been in conversation with because I'm deep in these conversations. But I feel like it's a little premature for me to chime in.
You're a teeny tiny nugget, just a amuse-bouche, a little ball of gelato.
Yes. Well, I love that we're, starting to define what a job is and how, is it evolving or if it's if the bottom rung is really just trying to become more equal in the playing field. Are these topics are kind of like us trying to figure out and self-organize. And I think we're trying to predict in a way so that we can feel better. Obviously, we want to feel more secure in this change, in this chaotic change. So we're trying to make sense of it. And this is what our conversations are doing today. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen, but we can see those trends. And Just notice again, how are we individually approaching this change, and how are we defining what thriving looks like to us? And then co-creating that, because the systems that are existing are broken. So I see a lot of people trying to build new systems, and that are not entire big ones, but small ones within these other systems. And I'm one of those people. And we can't do it alone. If we don't lock arms doing this, we're all just going to be doing a lot of work. We don't know if we're going to be effective, just efficient.
If that, I know. Yeah, thank you very
I'll chime
much.
in definitely later. Thank you.
Cool.
It's a
I
great
love that.
question.
Thank you so much. Alex, thank you for being patient.
Sorry, it's difficult to dodge what's already been said, but I'll try. I remember seeing, and I mentioned this before here about a year ago, whatever it was. I watched. It's still on on YouTube. You'll find a Richard Feynman talk about transistors, and what transistors are it's a little bit of tiny circuit that is flips 1 or 0 based on its couple of combinations. And Richard Feynman, before transistors were particularly useful, explained how if you have enough of them, you will get a computer. And maybe he foresaw the AI revolution. I don't remember the end of the video. But I remember how impressed I was that at that time, before computers existed as we know them, he had already said, this is capable, this little thing, all it does, the circuit that goes 1 to 0, will create what we're living in now. And it's hard to believe that, but that's what it is. Now, I see the AI, not everything up to here has been great and progress, but the LLMs, that technology, I see it as the transistor of the next evolution. And I'll go, I think Jesse said the words, we don't know how far it's going to go. And I reckon because of the pseudo thinking element, if you have a whole load of small, primitive pseudo thinking elements, we could probably make a very coherent, very sophisticated, higher element. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no job that will not disappear because of AI. Yes, now our current standards say, oh, it hallucinates, does this. Trust me, I mean, what Klaus is saying, one good way of getting around hallucinations. And the scope of change that we can, the scope of inventiveness, the scope of discovery, when your basic thinking block is a thinking block. Your basic block is a thinking block. I think it's phenomenal where it's going to go. Now, I've recalled a couple of times that I used to employ a couple of programmers. I don't anymore because AI does it. We could all relate to stories as to how AI has literally displaced people. I've experienced it, and I'm not even a big employer. Now, the interesting thing is how it affects us now. And I agree with everything everybody said, because we're pretty blind in how we're going about it. But I'll say this, one of the guys that has a very slick call center AI-based software, I was listening to about a year and a half ago, he said, we can automate any call center, but the effect on the economy will be quite catastrophic, in his opinion. Because, for example, Philippines, 40% of the Philippines economy is call centers. And he said, you can put 1.5 million system and replace every single one of them. Okay, so then it becomes a scale of, okay, that's going to be very quick. And it's not that they won't find anything else to do, because people have elasticity in their personal beliefs, economies, wealth, or whatever, and the system will adjust for a while. But ultimately, they've got to find something else to do. And I actually think that something else has always been knowledge or whatever. And people have already spoken about the fact that the knowledge work is kind of going higher and higher. So I don't think it's going to be good, especially in the short term. I for the first time in my life, I'm more an Austrian economist type person, but for the first time in my life, I think UBI will be unavoidable. I don't see how else the system will work. But a couple of other things along that line. I want to short India. And why do I want to short India? Because there is no point shorting Apple. thinking that so many people, every company, every tech bro that runs a company will be able to run it with 5 people, right? So they're not going to share the wealth. They're not types. Our economy is a crony capitalist economy. They don't share the wealth downwards, at least not in the way that would be meaningful. And we're all talking with a Western, British, US approach, but the rest of the world might have a few more problems than us. We're very wealthy as economies. So to go back to shorting India, India will have a surplus of engineers. And unless someone pays them to create better AIs which further increases the AI capability, I don't know what else they're going to do. They're very, they're not going to go to agrarian society. Most of them will not. I will not. I won't go to that. So I guess the point I'm making is, I think the upside of AI from a admiration point of view is extreme. I think the downside for humanity, whatever everybody says is going to create new jobs or whatever, my personal opinion is, in the medium term, it's dire. Absolutely dire. I could give you lots of examples as to why. And I guess what Jerry and everybody else is talking about here is, how do we navigate? Where are we going to end up with? Assume that we're not going to be able to do anything because they will do it. How are we going to get there, and how's society going to be structured at that point? And I'm perfectly prepared that all of you will turn around and say, Alex, hasn't happened before, not going to happen again. But that's where I am at the moment. No cures. I've got ideas for cures, but they're not all along the UBI kind of idea.
Thank you, Alex, a lot. This is a tiny interjection. I haven't thought deeply enough about it, but my own feeling about UBI is probably going to be very necessary, and it's not a good Band-Aid. It is just not a good Band-Aid, and I'm unclear what I would replace it with. But I think UBI is going to be forced into many societies. I just don't know how that's going to play out.
Sorry, Jeremy, can I
Go
just
ahead.
refine that? When I say UBI,
Yeah, please.
it has to be a way by which to support the population, basic stuff. I equate that to UBI, whether it's a UBI with the intellectual rigor of UBI, or whether it's everybody's unemployed and they get a stipend. I'm not sure.
Or we change how housing works, and lots of people grow food and share the food. I mean, there's fundamental changes to the way the economy is seen and actually functions that could trickle out of the changes we're talking about here. We're likely to resist that heavily, especially politicians and the protectors of capitalism. But there's an argument, there's a fun, reasonable, scary argument to make that what we need is a fundamental reshaping of how the economy functions, which happens every multiple centuries. But it takes multiple centuries to happen. We just might be in one of those periods of punctuated equilibrium right this minute. Mr. Nelson.
It seems I'm in lots of calls like this, and
damn it, really?
And often I have 2 roles. One is to say, we've seen this story before. This is not totally radical. I mean, I having lived through the creation of internet policy in the late 80s. I mean, we had the hype. The internet did have huge impact. We went from 100,000 people to 4 billion people using it. And there was an urge to regulate and control, and there was certainly a lot of displacement, particularly among first the journalists. This is another higher level, but there are a lot of political barriers, there are a lot of cultural barriers, and there's a huge technical barrier that I often have to bring up in these conversations. And that is that this whole thing is feeding on data and words. And a lot of that data and words are wrong or incomplete. the only way we can really get to where we need to go here is to stop thinking of AI versus people to AI enhancing people and replacing the AI abbreviation with augmented intelligence. You've said this all the time. This is a theme that other people say. But when it comes down to it, the journalists and a lot of the CEOs, certainly almost every politician, sees AI over here and people over there. And they're not thinking about the fact that when you actually look at how AI is used, when you team, the result is better. Sometimes it's just because the human in the loop says, no, that's stupid. Give me more data. But in other cases, it's because the AI is asked a prompt and it's not the right prompt, which of course leads to the wrong answers. The other problem that I'm often pointing out is that AI is not 90% Gen AI. Again, creating words and more words out of old words, that's 10% maybe of the overall picture. Creating new answers out of data using agentic AI, that's really important. In some cases, helping us analyze what people are really saying so that we can get better data out of transcripts like this one. I mean, there's all sorts of ways in which AI is going to be used, but because the entry-level app has been ChatGPT, we're just so focused on that. And so I want to get us at some future date to just say we're not going to mention the word AI for 90 minutes. We're going to focus on data and identity and truth, and particularly how the data can be verified by teams of people working with the technology. I don't hear this enough. I heard a great hour and a half yesterday because the National Academy of Sciences convened a webinar on human AI collaboration and teaming. And it was extraordinary. One of the speakers is one of my heroes from 30 years ago, Thomas Malone at MIT. And he is head of the Center for Collective Intelligence. He's also done some of the best work on how technology changes organizations and productivity. But the guy I hadn't heard before is Michael Muller, Muller. And he's a deep geek at IBM. And he gave a nice framework. I will see if I can get the slides. I think I can for both Muller's talk and Malone's talk.
Did Andrew Muller?
Thomas.
Thomas.
Oh no, Andrew Muller.
Andrew Muller.
Yeah, it was Andrew. No, Michael Muller.
Michael Muller. Thanks.
Yeah, he's not somebody I've seen before. I will put up links. But Thomas Malone's talk was like the perfect briefing for a politician and a journalist who, again, has this and needs to understand the integration of these technologies with real human minds. Long rant, but the other thing I'd point you to, and I'll put a link to this too, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday here in Washington, we're having a AI Plus Summit. And it's going to be pretty high level and a lot of sales pitches, but there are always nuggets. Last year it was really interesting, and a lot of high level deputy secretary people and generals were speaking. Some showed huge deep insight. Others had clearly just asked their staff to write them something, and the staff had just asked ChatGPT to write something. It was amusing to see how little some of these top level people knew and how little their staff knew.
It's just a series of tubes.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Alex.
Yeah, hi. Just quickly, something Mike said just reminded me just of a topic. We say that when the internet came along, lots of jobs were created, and we kind of blithely make that comment, okay? And it's not wrong. we managed to work around it. But I think it's important that we realize that that coincided with a great offshoring of jobs, which had the effect of making everyone super wealthy. Services ramped up, everything ramped up. And so we left whatever jobs the AI took over, and we ended up with restaurants or whatever else we did. And I don't think people appreciate that it wasn't just the internet that people managed to find different ways around. It was the fact that, whether it was right or wrong, the offshoring of words, it made the West or the people of the West incredibly wealthier. That has come to an end now because China and the rest of the world is actually, and also the fact that all our economies are so IT driven, let alone AI driven, they have a lot of resources and intellect and everything else. So we're not going to have a crutch of the economy that grew because it was going to grow, as we did that coincided with the internet. And I think that's quite important to account. And when we talk about these things, okay, obviously we want to talk how we're going to make society better, etc. That's the topic. That's what Jerry wants, and that's what we're here to do. But I think we're not taking into account other areas that might help or hinder as we got to this point. Because I firmly believe, everybody says that the internet was the generator of wealth. I think it was a generator of wealth. I think most of it was offshoring jobs. But that's my opinion. I'm not an economist or anything. Just it's worth thinking about that.
Thanks, Alex. Mark, Mike, do you still have your hand up from before? You can put your hand down in the Zoom, please. Thanks, Mark.
First, thank you, Mike. We go through generations of AI, as I've pointed out many times, and back in 2017, which is
ancient history now.
Yeah, Paleolithic times of
my
God. Collective intelligence. There were a lot, that was the buzzword of how to basically, in a organization that does things, how to basically do knowledge management with quote unquote AI. Again, my career has basically been the definition of knowledge engineering, getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And who are the right people? What's the right information? And what, very critically, is the time frame. We have talked about making things faster. We have not talked about making things wiser, making things more user-friendly, making things make sense. The whole sense making is, a lot of humans poking at algorithms, at, ways of displaying data so that humans can make good decisions and actually understand what is going on for a particular purpose. And it's the intent, what the purpose is for this, that is that higher level knowledge. Certainly in home healthcare, I wrote a system for a home healthcare company to basically do scheduling and allow scheduling to be easier and look for slots, blah, blah, blah. But the people who were doing home healthcare were people. And certainly as an aging person, as all of us are, I'm not sure that my home healthcare is going to be replaced by an AI. And hopefully I'll be independent. But I think there are many jobs that will not go away. And I'd like to see, yes, I know Japan for decades, at least 2 decades, has experimented with robot home healthcare. Very familiar with that. And the Harvard sociologist who writes about that, a woman, I forget her name, who wrote about that 20 years ago. And her wonderful book was talking about something like a Furby, where a child learns how to interact with a semi autonomous agent toy.
Remember
And how,
Tamagotchis?
yes, I do remember Tamagotchis. This was more like a teddy bear that talked and say, "I love you."
Yeah.
And that scared her. Sherry Turkle, I think, maybe.
Sure.
I think that was the person. And I don't want to somehow lose the sense that
Is the book Alone Together?
it's possibly, yes.
Okay.
I don't want to lose the sense that there are human intentions that are different in the economy and in the society, where if we basically come and say, here's this big panacea, and according to the first Whole Earth Review cover on computers are poison. All panaceas are poison. Where we basically focus on number one, follow the money. Number two, follow the dream. I'm amazed by how many people at Singularity University are going, we are going to have these machines of loving grace. And that assumption doesn't square with what I've seen of Siri or Samsung AI. It's much more complicated than that. And, I've been looking at more of the semiotics, exactly what makes meaning when we have an interaction. And that, again, is only a small part of it. There are many people who are in this field of where our education is going, where our farming is going, where our entertainment is going, but we have the fire hose. How do we in OGM basically say, hey, there are minds which are human, there are proto minds that are algorithmic and based on data. And many of the people at the beginning of the data revolution basically hired a lot of people to clean up that data before the data got into the training cycle of AI. And they made their differentiation on that fact. I went to a number of their presentations here in San Francisco, again, 2 decades ago. I'm also interested in, I guess, the categorization that used to be Web3. How are we going to do these knowledge graphs in a way that makes sense making sensible? Understanding is not necessarily knowledge, and there's a great book on understanding recently. One of its examples is, do you understand how a zipper works? We can all use zippers, but can we write a full page of how a zipper actually works? And we typically cannot. I can't. Thank you.
There are little gremlins inside the mechanism that are weaving together the little teeth from both sides, and they fit them as you go up and down. It's really kind of cool.
And how does the unzipping and zipping work with
Good point.
with the with the wedge, and what is the angle? What is the necessary angles? How is it produced? How is
Why
it?
is YKK the dominant player?
Yes, there's that too. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Gil, and feel free to take a beat before stepping in. We've been going at our usual slightly frenzied pace.
Yes, we have, and there's so much here. And I've made a few notes to help me find my way back through this. Where am I? Bob Dunham taught me years ago, Bob Dunham of the Center for Generative Leadership, taught me years ago to always ask the question, for the sake of what? Behind anything, behind any initiative, project, proposal, whatever, for the sake of what? Why, why is this? To take care of what concerns is this being done? And I think that's a background question for me in this whole conversation. Mike, I really appreciated what you had to say about collaborative intelligence. For me, that's the most compelling and most appealing part of this whole story. And my own experience in working with AIs has been, I've been using the metaphor of an exoskeleton. You've seen the mechanical exoskeletons that somebody could strap on that would enable a worker to pick up much more weight than they normally could, or somebody to run faster than they normally can. And so I'm experiencing this as an intellectual and mental exoskeleton. I started out with the metaphor of, a team of research assistants, team of postdocs working with me, my own legal staff, my medical staff that can do, answer questions for me. But now, as it's more of a collaborative dialogic process with my pet AIs, I feel like that, like I'm able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Specific case in point, I'm having a meeting with my primary care physician this afternoon. I did some work with AI over the last couple of days. I'm going in as a much more informed, much more capable patient, able to both understand the issues that we're looking at, have questions and proposals that I couldn't have done any other way. So exoskeleton metaphor, but coming back to for the sake of what, this is, it's vivid to me that this is not a technology conversation that we're having. It's a political economy conversation. Like, what are we trying to do for the sake of what? How are we organizing society? Mark, you were talking about caregivers. I've experienced working with caregivers, both for my wife when she was really ill and for both of my parents in the last years of their lives. And it's a really challenging situation in this country. You have people who are angels, frankly, in the kind of care they're able to give, which is different than what a robot can do. And they're miserably paid. These are people who are holding people's lives in their hands. We're paying them a minimum wage. And it echoes for me, how we treat teachers in this country, meagerly paid. And in Finland, they're high paid. And it's a societal decision about what to take care of. And where to invest resources. And we're, it seems to me, in the grips of a kind of extreme capitalism. I'll hyphenate the word, as I sometimes do, to emphasize that it's a tension between capital and labor. And the game we're in is to minimize returns to labor and maximize returns to capital. Paul Hawken wrote years ago about how different things would be if we emphasized resource productivity rather than labor productivity. We've been in the game of cutting workers and spending more on energy, which has climate implications and all the rest. And what if we did it the other way around? Anyhow, there's a bundle of questions there that go to, what is this for? There's billboards in San Francisco. I don't have, somebody's probably going to pull this up in a second, that essentially say, are you still hiring humans?
Kevin Jones posted it to the OGM list.
Yeah, there you go.
Last night.
And so, the tech bro desire is for no humans. And in fact, Every had an article this week about speculating about the first one-person billion-dollar company, which maybe somebody here will create. But in the world without humans being employed, who buys the crap that the companies make? And we'll go back 170 years, where Marx wrote about the intrinsic cyclical crisis of capitalism, that this drive to move resources from workers to capital cyclically breaks the market, because there's nobody who can buy stuff. So you have a boom bust cycle built into the nature of that game. There you go. Thank you, whoever did that. Anyhow, all that. So for the sake of what? And the relationship of people and capital are, for me, the background questions in this matter of technology, and huge opportunity and promise here. Call centers, maybe not. There are companies that have been automating their call centers, AIing their call centers, and pulling it back because it's working like crap. Some congressperson did a thing the other day about what they have done to the Social Security call center by AIing it, and it's a death loop. horrific. It's like, the worst. So, and call centers are not necessarily great technology either, since they are tending to be minimize contact, maximize churn. We ran a call center back in the 80s where the guideline to the employees was not to move as quickly as possible, have the shortest possible conversation, make as much money as you possibly can. But the guidelines to them was build relationship with customers, spend as much time on the phone as you need to do that. And my board said, "You're crazy." And I said, "Watch me." And we got 2x returns in terms of money raised, in terms of repeat business and so forth. So care actually matters. And the game we're in doesn't think that it does. I'm complete.
Thanks, Gil. Zappos famously got big and famous for doing exactly that, for reversing the orders to the call center, which is normally seen as a cost center that you need to minimize and put in the basement. And for them, the reps were absolutely the face of the company, and their orders were to deliver wow, to create situations where people would tell stories about the interaction and be their marketing, and it worked really, really well.
There were stories about Zappos customer service people sending extra product to people who had issues and sending flowers to their houses to make up for the grief. And, in the bean counter world cannot understand that, but it worked because they took care of people. Yeah, they took care of people who were taking care of people. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Klaus.
It's the old Disney paradigm. Everybody services a customer or services someone who services a customer. Love the logo there. So I'm processing the disruptions that are coming in the food system, because that's where I thrive and what I understand. And the food system is in desperate need of decentralization and localization. But the current efforts by both the corporate structure and the political process is going into the exact opposite. So I listened yesterday to the House Ag Committee Chairman Thompson, and all the initiatives they're putting in are detrimental to small farmers and to rural marketplaces. There is some lip service to it, but the money really goes to the commodity growers. So I have been, getting close to NGOs, several groups, also local, for the last few years, and they're panicked because their money has just dried up. I mean, they cut all the grants. I mean, here the High Desert Food and Farm Alliance in Bend here, for example, they're supporting 58 small farmers. They have a seven-figure budget, but it's mostly federal grants. And it's gone. I mean, they just cut it off. And so I'm meeting with them now to say, what are your alternatives? What are your options? Most likely, you have to figure out how to monetize yourself. But how do you do that, right? And so in every phase of the food economy, no matter what you do, you have to have an understanding of the economy, of the food economy as a system, right? Because you have to understand how food moves from farm to aggregator to processor to storage, into your business. And that knowledge is just not there, right? Because and when I worked international, for this German food wholesaler, that was a corporate strategist, and we were operating in 30 countries, and I had a team of analysts in each country. I would go to, whether it's India or Russia or China or Turkey, in every of these economies, you had indigenous knowledge, right? You had the food system operated the way it operated because they have been doing this for hundreds of years, right? And it just evolved. It was hugely decentralized, but everybody understood their role in the middle of it. That native knowledge has been lost here in the US. People just don't understand the the entire process of contracting, for example. You go to a local catering organization here, let's say the school system, the hospital, or the university, and so on, who are serving tens of thousands of meals per day. And you say, why don't you buy local? Well, the local market is completely disorganized. You know, they don't know how to contract. They don't know how to do futures and prepare. And there's no more aggregators in the middle, right? Because a big operator needs maybe 10 or 12 farmers to coordinate in order to supply a big account. So that kind of knowledge you can replicate in AI. No, so here you can bring in an AI agents that you can talk with, and they explain the process and they assist, right? And the other thing you can do with AI is share knowledge. So the AI can train itself. You can train the AI, for example, to do a national search on best seed companies, best fertilizer companies, transportation companies, silos that are free. I had a case of a farmer in the Palouse region just testing this stuff. The guy was sitting on 10 million pounds of potatoes and got stiffed by one of the big companies, French fry manufacturers. They just canceled the order. So here's a farmer sitting on 10 million pounds of potatoes. I mean, that would have been a serious hit. He didn't know what to do. So the AI suggested to freeze dry those potatoes, you know, turn them into potato flakes, into thickening material for sauces, and it identified 6 processors within the region that have the capacity to do this, and bingo, problem solved. You know, and so it's that kind of very down to earth technical stuff, you know, that you can do, but it just requires, first of all, to train these AIs, which is actually. It's a skill set, I suppose, but it's really not that complicated once you get the hang of it. But then to train people in using it and thinking of it, you know, this is my sage. This is my go-to word of thing, you know, that just can give me answers that I need right now. So I think that the economy desperately needs to decentralize. Right? If we keep going the way we do right now, we'll have a mess, particularly in the food system, you know, because of the way Washington is allocating money to all the wrong places right now. So you will need to fire up these NGOs in some way to where they become business people, you know, and where they learn how to monetize themselves, because otherwise it's going to go away. You know, there is no money in the system anymore.
Mm-hmm. Klaus, thank you. The freeze-drying potato strategy beats the traditional strategy, which would have been to dump 10 million pounds of potatoes on the front lawn of the CEO of the company that stiffed you.
Well,
but it seems much more productive to actually go put them to a new purpose.
There is right now something on LinkedIn where a farmer was saying he wanted to order potatoes, sort of low quality, throwaway kind of potatoes to feed to his cattle, and he ended up getting premium first class potatoes, and he was stunned, and he's going, the waste, you know, in the system is just stunning. You know, how do I get these potatoes? Well, the farmer just grew it, couldn't get a market, and then he dumped it basically for a tax write-off, right? So instead of, you know, knowing what you can do with food in order to preserve it, we have been learning to preserve food for thousands of years in different forms and shapes, right? So this is all possible, but to help someone think through what can I do here. Now, I mean, that is hugely valuable.
We owe potatoes to the Incas and other Andean populations in Peru and Bolivia, and they have a form of freeze-dried potato called chuño, where you put the potatoes out, you step on them until you kind of crush the moisture out of them, and then you let them freeze dry out in the cold air. And this is extremely portable, nutritious food. And there are variants of this, like pemmican in the US. There are variants of very portable, dried, long-lived food around the world. Sorry. both of my brains are full of little trivia like that. Jose, off to you.
I'm glad I don't see you all too often. My brain would be full of such trivia. And I have a little brain, so it would be tough. I think AI will be sort of the tipping point of computer technology. We'll look back on this in a couple of 100 years and go, oh, in 50 years, we went from not having personal computers to having AI. And we won't recognize the personal computer as a thing that existed. It'll just be a little blip in time, as we know it, as we know computers to be today. Because we haven't talked about what happens when our operating system is AI on our computers, right? We haven't talked about how our computers with AI as OSs could interact with each other and with other systems autonomously. So I think there's a lot that we haven't described for what AI is and will be, and historically what I think it will be seen as. What I think, though, we're not saying is, and it leads me to inquire, is it so much more, because it is the culmination of, at the very least, 50 years of development. Is it so much more than, oh, now we need to think about jobs and work and capital and workers and all of the components of a system that was built on a previous set of rules? Do we fundamentally change the rules now? And that in so doing, in so fundamentally changing the rules, that we don't actually have to think about what's going to happen to those components from the previous rule set, but that we need to think about what the new rule set will be. What's going to be the new system? Because I can't see this system surviving this change in fundamentals. The fundamentals are gone. I mean, we're talking about the fact that maybe a person could be the first billionaire single person business, right? $1 trillion business, whatever it may be. We're still thinking in a paradigm where those things mattered because you had to create a different type of organization. The ability to create organizations with products and services today is exponentially greater than it was even 5-10 years ago. How do we compare those two things? I don't think they're comparable. And so for me, the question is really about, and I hate to use this word because it's been overused, but it's a paradigm shift in the system that we've had to something new that we need to quickly figure out what it is and what it will be. That's what I think is the question, not so much what are the little things that we can change now. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jose. And sorry for yelping when you said paradigm shift. It reminded me, I think I was part of a funny group once long ago where we had to put like $5 in a jar if somebody said the word paradigm. I will also argue that Trump 2, the second Trump administration, is an active attempt to fundamentally change the rules. The policies that they are following are, in fact, following a set of ground rules that I distinctly don't agree with, but they are driving those hard through American society and influencing the globe as hard as they can too in the process. They're not bashful about all of that, however many laws they might be violating. Mark.
BPR, business process reengineering. And a question for Jesse about something called Day Balancer. But also, thank you to Jose. Thank you for Klaus. I mean, really fertile information. And it brings me back to Gregory Bateson. Everything goes back to Gregory Bateson for me because he's my kind of intellectual foundation of change and the different kinds of change. Whether that change is a forced change or whether it's like entropy, a natural change. It just will happen. Leave it alone. You can't change it unless you add input into the system. And how do humans change? I mean, listening to Klaus, I'm going, Klaus, that's amazing. But how do we reach the people who are in either need? I mean, all people have needs, but let's just go with needs. People have needs. How do we reach them? And that is, coming from Bateson and thinking rather in things than in processes, rather in lines than in cycles. That is a shift in ways of thinking and how that happens. And a lot of Bateson and the early cybernetics conferences were about how difficult it is to think in this way. And do we have an education revolution based on process thinking as opposed to object thinking? Certainly I would argue for it, but I don't have as much of a reach as some others. And certainly I would imagine I could go to any AI school on the planet and 1% of the folk would likely know who Gregory Bateson even is, much less Norbert Wiener. Well, probably they'd know who Norbert Wiener is, but I would love to ask Jesse about Day Balancer. Thank you.
Well, what good timing is that? She happens to be next in the queue.
Oh, timed. Thanks, Mark. You talk about behavior change and, in order for us to be able to meet our needs and others to meet our needs, we have to be able to define our needs. And I found that a lot of people just don't know what they want until they're asked. They kind of figure out how to define how they thrive actually stops people to like go, oh, I haven't really determined that. So a lot of times we're doing a lot of goal driven work throughout our days, but we really don't know ultimately what we want. So Jose, the new system, and Mark, you just kind of kicked it off there. So I've been building something called the Circular Talent Network with about, I guess, 250 people, and I've invited one person at a time, like Jerry and Pete and Scott, and everyone has their own experience, because in the beginning, Jerry was one experience and then Scott just had the newest. So, but what happens is we all contribute because we're co-owners. As one person joins a group of 250 people, they get to contribute their assets and their expertise and their offerings to this new system. And all 250 people can contribute to this new person that just came in. And so we're directly connecting what we're discussing here. And so instead of, I guess, a traditional model where one person has one job and they lose it and they face their own economic crisis, we're creating this multiple value exchange pathways. And if one stream gets disrupted, then whether it's AI or anything else, you have other streams for stability, and you're working with your trusted network because you're inviting them in. So I guess the key part is that we get to decide what our value is in this network, and everyone is a co-owner. As this dollar-driven economy punishes people for taking care of others, this is a way to actually own our value systems and, help people in the planet get recognized as essential work, not just economically punitive work. So We're just testing it whether communities can create our own economic resilience and just wait instead of waiting for the broader system to figure it out, because we can't.
Thanks, Jesse.
Very quickly, thank you, Jesse. When I was at the Internet Archive and in the decentralized web groups, there were many presentations about how we basically define our community and finance our community, and when people fall down, how to bring them back up. And I was looking at the Day Balancer site, and I've seen many types of things about this, and I'm wondering about this notion that Klaus has about decentralization of economic interdependency. Who's our community? Should I join Day Balancer? How do I decide? Thank you very much, and appreciate what you said, and I'll look more at it. Thank you.
You. And really the whole point is to get off of the computer for me. We're working with intentional communities who are already existing, so that we can help them, bridge tech and what they want to do in this real analog world. And it's eHarmony for impact professionals, just people that really want to do something good for people on the planet. And it's all free. Although the employer would pay for it if a job was placed, that's the only way that we're going to generate income or some kind of profit for the circular network. But also money goes back into the network to people, those who are in need. So that's the circular model that's on daybalancer.com. That's kind of Maslow's hierarchy. So if you don't have shelter or housing, we're going to help you. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Ken, nice to see you. I was just regretting that we didn't have Ken on the call, so I was looking around, and I was probably going to read All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace because it came up early in the conversation and seemed quite appropriate. And I know that you like to read poetry, so I was wondering if you'd like to read that one at the end or something different.
I can do either one.
That sounds great. Whatever pleases thee.
Okay.
And then we have just a few more minutes left in our call before we get to a closing poem.
I would like to welcome Kalia. I see Kalia's on this call, and
Kalia has
Resmi.
been listening in all along. Remzi.
Resmi as well. Hey there.
And Judith too.
And Judy just arrived.
Wow.
Apologies, I had a conflict.
Oh, conflicts are bad. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I had some people coming about my move coming up in the next month or so, and so they came later than they were supposed to.
Sorry about that. We missed you.
And conflict and conflict resolution.
Yes. Right there. All in a bucket. Kalia's been listening in, but I don't know that she's still listening to us, but yeah. Oh, she's in the chat. Look, and now she's live.
Hi.
Any thoughts, Kalia?
I don't know what to make of AI. I just want to network bioregional people working on bioregional stuff together, and I don't know, all the identity tech that I've worked on for 20 years is sort of finally getting mature enough to go out into the real world and solve real problems, and which is super exciting. And then it feels like AI is forcing us to run faster than we planned. And how do we do that? Well, it's kind of a big question. I put a link into a project I just joined, working on verifiable communities using our technologies. It's aligned with the first person credential work that some folks are also doing, like, how do we know you're human and not scan your eyeballs, given that World just made the cover of Time this week. God, they must have good PR, but it's a bit scary.
Kalia, are you bumping into anybody who's doing great work on the questions you just said? Like who do you really like who's pushing this forward in the right directions?
Well, the project I put a link to in the chat, Sideways, in the verifiable communities, Grace Rachmani and folks, Jack, are leading that. And then Drummond Reed has the link is too hard for me to find on my phone and put into chat. The
Sure.
first person credentials work.
Where has Drummond ended up? Sovereign Foundation? No.
Oh, Sovereign's dead.
Sovereign's dead, yeah.
That died
Is he AYRA?
2 months into
AYRA?
the pandemic, quietly, when no one was paying attention.
Yeah.
He's been at a company called Gen, formerly Avast, anyways, it went through, a ton of, he's left that now, and he's focused on the first person credentials work with IRA Foundation.
Huh. Okay, so it is AYRA. That's what I was just asking about.
Yeah, and there's a long slide deck about the first person credential stuff that I would link to if I was on it. But
Cool.
anyways, if folks are interested in, I don't know, I don't totally understand how this community works, but at some point, if folks want a briefing or updates or understanding, I'm happy to share.
Sweet. Thank you. Any other closing thoughts from what we talked about, or opening thoughts to feed a different call?
I guess I'm just worried about, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Judy.
Certainly what Kalia mentioned, but I was going, what about next week? But I didn't want to actually say next week. But
I will say second.
Thanks. Judy, go ahead.
Well, I'm just getting really tired of AI and wondering how to either find alternatives that are more human and more introspective than AI is, or something of that dimension.
Are you having AI fatigue?
Yes.
Alas.
I mentioned
Go ahead.
I mentioned
Alex?
earlier on, if it's worth anyone putting their neck on the block and saying, in 15 years, this is what AI will be doing really well and we'll be better off for it.
Good predictions are hard to do. If you read super forecasting, but they're definable, but you just have to kind of pick what you're going to measure when, and it has to be sort of frameable so that you know that it happened or didn't happen, that kind of thing. But that would be pretty interesting. Then when the Industrial Revolution hits, Elizabeth I passes laws to try to protect cottage industry, women who were sewing piecework at home, because that's the way a lot of people made a living. And that work was just being sucked into factories that made large amounts of fabric and assembled clothes. And there were all sorts of attempts to protect small scale industry. And we know how that played out. Mostly the small scale stuff got squished and everything went really, really big, to the point where it reshaped the world. It feels like we're in the middle of one of those. And it's about ideas and words and a bunch of other stuff, not about the physical making of cloth and clothing, etc. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, I guess the piece I'm bothered by is that there's a building over reliance on AI like the ultimate truth finder, and it doesn't allow the discernment of human intervention, which I think is a critical part of keeping society balanced. And so how we would build in the humanity, not into the AI, but into countermeasures or checking processes or alternative resources that would pose questions that allow the dimensional discussion that comes from the human part.
Thank you. Mike?
Very quickly, I know I've mentioned on this call before that I'm on the board of the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation, created 35 years ago to remember and honor Arthur C. Clarke. We now have a side project called HAL 9000 to remember and honor HAL 9000. The idea is to identify some wonderful short videos, TikTok, YouTube, what have you, that project into the future and explain, just as Alex was saying, what AI could be used for. And we're going to speculate on what the real capabilities will be, but we're looking to go beyond the design of the technology and start thinking creatively on uses. So if anyone has seen particularly good short videos or know of somebody who's producing them or collecting them, that would help guide our efforts a lot.
Mike, I just watched 2010 on YouTube's it's free with ads. Yep. And that was kind of fun.
Well, his memory continues to shape us.
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's eerie how well you do that, Jerry.
I practiced a little bit before saying that. And I have a collection of old videos like Knowledge Navigator. I have a thought in my brain that I'll post to the chat of those because it's interesting. Like AT&T did a bunch of ads called You Will back in the days of pen computing before smartphones and all that. And some of them were pretty good, not bad. But there's a bunch of things like that I've got in the collection.
Yeah, that would be helpful just to, again, highlight how videos and vision can shape the actual technology that gets adopted, because it not only drives the innovators to do things, it drives the market to demand things that they hadn't thought to demand.
And arguably the Knowledge Navigator was just way too ahead of its time because it got ridiculed a lot, but we are in them times right now. If you go watch the Knowledge Navigator video again. Yep. Stacy, please.
Yes, to Judy's point, when I worked with children, if they were getting into trouble, what I would do is I would redirect them and give them another activity. I look at AI like that. It's there, people are going to be wanting to push it out. So how do we redirect it in better ways? When I hear Klaus speaking, I thought to myself, I like the idea of using AI to connect communities or systems to each other. I don't like the idea of using AI to connect people to each other because I want that to happen within the system, within their network. What else did I want to say? The other thing to what Judy was saying about thinking, I'd like to know what Klaus thinks about this because he's the one that I know that's done the most training. But I think if we were teaching children how to train the AI, we could use that to help encourage critical thinking in the way that it's being taught. So those are just my suggestions.
Thank you. It might make a really nice OGM topic to think about critical thinking and lack thereof, how to grow that, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be a good thing. I think next Thursday is the first Thursday of June, so we'll do a check-in round. So we'll be looking for topics for the week after that.
Yeah, I have 4 granddaughters, and I gave them Amazon tablets with Khan Miko on it, Khan Academy, and they're using it to draw. And in fact, my oldest granddaughter just won a competition with the Jewish Community Center there in Nashville as the youngest entry. They didn't even want to accept her because she's not even in first grade, right? Or she's just in first grade, and she won because she came up with this creative painting there. So yeah, kids take to it like it's just totally fluid. The relationship there is really something else. My son finally, he worked for a company that's AI driven, but he really didn't had sort of an ambiguous relationship with it. But now he lost his job. He's just applying for a new one, and he is now, and I actually helped him doing it, engaging into this conversation with his AI to what is this position all about? And it's a senior level talent branding position. And why are they? What are they expecting from this position? Why did they create this position? What is the anticipated outcome? So his interview is today. So he's like totally prepped, in in going in there. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that it can. But yeah, young people are going to have a completely intuitive relationship, with this AI, and that is be very difficult, for even middle-aged people, who saw this creep up on them, to just process and understand what this is and how it works beyond, writing some fancy letters.
So many things creep up on us as we get older.
Yes.
Ken, the floor is yours for whatever you would like to take us into.
Hello, everybody. I'm torn. I have a bunch of poems open. I think I'm going to read something that just came to me this week that isn't so much about AI, but it has a lot to do with assumptions, as you'll see when I get to the last line. And I think there's a lot of assumptions we make about AI that might have a parallel here. It's called The Walkout, and it's by an Irish poet by the name of Alice Kinsella. She saw it coming, the cold pit in the bed, his irregular hours, strolling in with the expectation for dinner, a rub of her legs. She wondered if he had a second family like in the films. A better dressed wife pops up at a patriarch's funeral, towing 2 children with his eyes. She heard the door in the morning, like a departure for work. Imagine dew on the windscreen, pink sky, squabbling birds. After a night of straying, his soft step on the stairs, a too-needed snuggle, sour breath close to hers. When it happened, she didn't know it would be the last time, that tired cliche. Her hands in his hair, the rumble of his throat. When she woke, an indent in the pillow was all that remained. She felt nothing but normal as she packed lunches, swept floors, filled bowls. In the weeks that followed, she told herself he'd return. She wasn't the first woman scorned. To be a doormat, to an ungrateful, no, she stopped herself. He'd be back. Eventually, the child asked, Mom, where's the cat?
I love that. I so love that. I needed it today too.
Oh, Ken, thank you. Thank you.
I figured we had 4 women on the call today, which is unusual. So this is a good home to read with the women on the call. But
Yeah.
It's a great poem, Ken.
Oh man, whew, the suspense was killing me. Thank you. That was great.
That's outstanding. Really outstanding, Ken.
I thank you all for being here and for a lovely discussion. Let's be careful out there and see if we can make a dent in these issues. Thanks all.
Adios.
Thanks, everyone.
GTFN.